What is something that you have seen that creeped you out in the woods, mountains, or ocean that you still, to this day, have no explanation for? I was driving with my dad to Nevada to place a few bets on the NFL playoffs. We had a little over a quarter tank of gas and decided at the next stop, 35 miles up, we'll stop for gas. About 5 miles into the drive from that sign, we see a guy walking on the side of the road, walking facing the oncoming cars, but at a safe distance, like if the freeway had a bike lane, that's where he was. He had on jeans, a brown jacket and a red hat. We both mentioned that it was kind of odd. Where was he walking from? Why was he walking? Surely he could have called someone. Didn't appear to be homeless, but who knows? My dad and I said a few things like that, then that was about it. Then, we see a sign coming up. Gas station was 5 miles away. About a mile past the sign, guess who we fleabing see walking on the side of the road? Same guy, same outfit, walking in the same direction. Since we both saw it, that definitely confirmed it. As I'm sure one person would question themselves. I slowly looked at my dad after I saw him upcoming, then we passed him, so just around 10 seconds total. My dad said, "The same guy, I knew it was." I just kind of quietly said, "What?" I heard him, it was more of a shocked what. I didn't say anything after that, I was just kind of in shock. To this day, of course, we have no idea how or what happened. My best friend and I hiked to a lake in the Olympic Peninsula. It was nighttime, and we had been settled into our site for a while. We had decided to take a small night hike down the river that fed into the lake, to go to the lake. On the shore there is one large boulder that just sits there and has a bronze plate that says something, don't remember. We had climbed onto the rock and found some spots to lay to watch the stars. He was watching what he thought to be a satellite. I was looking at some stars that made a box. Just 4 stars. One in each corner, nothing in the center. But it wasn't a perfect square. My friend tries to point out his satellite to me, cause it started moving weirdly. Just then I noticed this object was entering the border of my box of stars, slowly. And then just stops in the center. From moving across the sky to coming to a dead stop. We were both seeing the same thing. And it continued. The object began to move sporadically within the box. Not fast long movement but slowish, perceivable. Zigzag, up, down but never leaving the box. We did not get any recording, but it was really crazy to us when it happened and it still boggles us to this day. Wasn't me, but when I was in elementary school, I was really close friends with a girl who lived on a huge farm. The farm was in the middle of nowhere, completely surrounded by woods, and had just 2 neighbors who were friends with the family. Her brother and I would play a lot outside, often exploring the woods and just being kids. Nothing weird ever happened when I was there, but she would occasionally express how creeped out she was living there. Then one day in the middle of summer she randomly called my house phone. She was freaking out, breathing super heavy, and she was obviously crying. She told me she went out to walk her dog on the road, a single car road that abruptly stopped once it got to her driveway. The woods began where the road stopped. She said she was standing on the road while her dog was sniffing around the trees when her dog started barking. She looked up to where her dog was, and she swore to me that she saw what appeared to be a giant human-sized rabbit standing on its back feet and staring at her. She told me that it was much taller and bigger than her, and immediately when she saw it, she ran with her dog back to the house. She told her brother and her mom, and both of them just laughed at her. The way she told it was so real though, she was obviously very frightened about it. Not long after the family moved, their old house as well as their neighbors' houses were purchased by the city, I guess, and torn down so they could build a Walmart in their place. The Walmart never went up though, and there was never another giant Easter bunny creature sighting again. To this day, she swears she didn't make it up. Hiking trip in BC, Canada. Road trip. Roadside campground. Full of trucks and campers and caravans, tents, children, all kinds of noisy stuff. So, full of people when we arrived at around 10 p.m. Set up our tent, went to bed ASAP to get up early. We woke between 4 and 5 a.m. to pack our things. The campground was empty. No trash to be found. The campground ranger we ran into when leaving the site looked at us like we saw ghosts. We chalked it up to the other people being incredibly clean and quiet, having left just a few hours before we woke up, and we were in a very deep sleep. Oh, and all of their cars and trucks could levitate because there were no fleabing track marks anywhere. Oh, boy. Here goes nothing. So I'm from Central Florida. I've grown up in the Spring Hill, Hernando County area. I've always heard the usual stories about aliens and stuff. In fact, one of the neighboring cities in the area, Brooksville, was known as the UFO capital of the world, pre-Roswell. Our local craft brewery even has an IPA named after the event, the John Reeves incident. Now, I say this having been and kind of still being a skeptic, but for the life of me, I can't figure out what me and my friends saw in the woods one night in our late teens. It was my junior year of high school and my parents were out of town on a cruise. My buddies Eric and Mike swung over to my house with a 24-pack of Bud Light, and we started driving out to Wekiwachi, the preserves off of Shoreline Boulevard, a semi-desolate road that leads to Hernando Beach. It's super swampy, and there are brackish water creeks and channels all over. This particular area of Florida looks more like what you would imagine Louisiana looking like than something out of a Florida postcard picture. We make it to the nature preserve and start walking back to the spot known as Cliffs, which is essentially a large man-made lake from an old rock quarry that existed at the site years ago. Now I know I said there was a 24-pack involved in this, and Mike and Eric along with the rest of the guys and girls that showed up were plenty fleabing sauced. However, I was always a goody two-shoes in high school, and I never drank, smoked, or did any drugs until I got to college. In fact, had my parents not been gone, I wouldn't have even been able to make it out there. Especially at 3 a.m. on a cold but mid-December night. I was sober as a butter robot judge. One of the guys has the spectacular idea of taking a hike, specifically jumping over a fence that is along the border of the nature preserve and venturing back into some really thick wooded area. We all followed. We must have walked about a mile back into this area when all of a sudden, there looks to be glowing green mucus-looking stuff all over the ground. The best way to explain it was it looked like someone dumped gallons of glow sticks onto the ground. For some reason, we all decided to keep going further. At least until everyone heard the distinct scream of what sounded like a woman. The whole group started darting back through the woods in this moment. Except me. I turned around after seeing them dart, and I saw these blinding white lights all parallel to the ground and about 8 feet off of it. It was extremely dark, so I didn't really get to see the structure that these were attached to. I turned and darted, eventually catching up to the pack, none of us stopping until we got into our cars and pulled off. It's been well over 10 years since this happened. To this day, we still talk about it when we get together. We've tried looking up different bioluminescent species that are native to this part of Florida to no avail. We even tried looking up crimes and missing persons in the area, but we never found anything that corresponds with the correct time frame. To this very day, we can't wrap our brains around what we saw and heard that night. If anyone has witnessed something similar, please reach out. This has been bugging me for quite some time. I used to live about 5 km out of our town. From our back door all the way to town was all bushland. Well, at this time I was about 15 or 16, and I used to sneak out most nights to walk into town and meet up with a girl. Well, en route to this girl's, I used to have to walk past some old Aboriginal burial grounds in the middle of the bush. I used to go very stealthily and not use torches because I believed that if you were walking around with a torch, you were very easily seen by anyone else, but I still had one on me just in case of emergencies. Every night I walked past the burial grounds, I would get this really creepy feeling as if I was being watched, but just chalked it up to my mind messing with me. This one night with no moon out, I was walking past as usual when I got that feeling. But as I got closer, it sounded as if something was moving around in the long grass over the burial grounds, but not running away like most animals would. It was getting creepier and creepier until finally I couldn't help myself any longer. I shone my torch where the sound was coming from, and all I saw was these red eyes staring at me through the grass at about the height of a crouched man. To this day I still don't really know what it was. I tell myself it was just a kangaroo. But I always walked right around the burial grounds after that. Two friends and I were once sitting on a prominent peak, Lion's Head, Dolly Sods, West Virginia, and we watched a bright light move erratically on the other side of the canyon. It would move through the trees and shoot straight up, then back to bouncing in and out of the forest. We watched it for about 45 minutes before it jetted down the canyon and out of sight in a blur. There's no trails over there and no way to move around that quickly. The woods are thick, and it's a rainforest with multiple canopies, so I don't think a drone is feasible, and it was about 5 years ago, so I doubt there were drones with those capabilities readily available. Couldn't have been a dog with a light since we saw it fly above the trees and ultimately leave in a blur. We have two theories. The area is known for bogs, and there is a dirt road across on the other side of the ridge. Apparently there are similar lights in Texas that's been proven to be from headlights and swamp gas. This is my favorite theory. But those lights are caused by a highway with highway traffic, not a dirt road that is itself mostly surrounded by thick forest. My buddy found something called jack-o'-lanterns, but all I could find on it was that it's an unknown phenomenon. Would love any thoughts or similar experiences from the area. That place is along the same ridge as the Green Bank Radio Telescope and close to the Navy's radio base. Will-o'-the-wisps, mate. Camping out in the Georgia wilderness with me, my father, my brother, and my friend, John. Now, this site was already kind of sketch. This was a community camping area, and literally no one is around. The only other two people there are the ranger and the groundskeeper. Ranger was a kindly old-timer, the groundskeeper some like special needs type that was built like a tank. Good folk. So we go about our day doing the usual campy stuff, still getting that whacked out vibe, odd visuals etched into trees, like demonic stuff, and the like, but we wrote that off as to some plumbers who were here prior just put that up to creep us out, whatever, the day continues. We set up camp and start a fire, it's getting dark out, and we are chilling, drinking some beers, till in the middle of his just talking and the like, I hear my dad go, "Hey, who's there?" We turn to where he's looking, and we see a figure, bright bone white. We only see 2 legs and 2 arms, no other features, it doesn't move. So we are on alert, we all have firearms, so we feel generally secure, however stuff begins to get weirder. After a moment, Dad shouts again, "Hey, you lost?" The figure sort of flares brightly for a moment, then behind us, my brother goes, "Fleeb, look." We turn and see another figure, tall and glowing, then another, and another all blink into existence until 5 surround us in the woods, unmoving and sitting completely still. Then all of a sudden, the figures of light flare very bright for a moment as we hear a quiet shriek off in the distance, then as it ends, the light instantly dies. We get to our car, guns drawn, and take off to the ranger's station. We get there, greeted by the ranger and groundskeeper, and he asks what the fuss was about. We tell him the story, and when the light figures come up, his expression drops like a sack of bricks, and he calls the groundsman, we will call him Gary. He begins to slowly mumble his story out. He tells us a story of him finishing a bit of work just after nightfall, and just as he was finishing up, the light people, as he put it, appeared and chased him. The ranger looked at us, absolutely horrified. I didn't think he was for Al, due to his mental lacking. "Boys, the motel's on me, let's get the plumbus out of here." We went to a local town's motel and stayed the night with the ranger and his groundskeeper, just drinking and having a good ole time, but still slightly horrified. We went to grab our stuff the next day. When we got back to grab our stuff, we never went back. When I was a kid, we were in the forest near my home, happened to be behind cemetery, but we weren't lost or very far from the cemetery, just exploring the local woods like we often did. For a moment we did become lost though, looking around for which way to go next, not panicking because we knew we were close to the edge of the woods either way. I didn't take more than a couple steps before I noticed with what my childhood memory recalls as pieces of old animal traps arranged in the shape of an arrow on the ground. It was an obvious arrow, but apparently long overgrown, and sure enough it led us straight out of the woods and into the cemetery. It's definitely nothing, but at that time it freaked me out because there was just no plausible reason why that bit of woods would have someone frequenting it so often. They were motivated to build an arrow guiding the way out, and fact that anybody who found themselves in that woods just came from the cemetery and can likely find their way back, what must have been no more than 25 meters into the forest. Also how I found it so quickly after I noticed, which way was out again? Poof, arrow sculpture.